Today I'm gonna show you how I made a Miles Morales mask with moving lenses. This video was sponsored by NordVPN. Hey, what's up? Sean here. This looks like an ordinary Spider-Man mask, but when I press this syringe, the eyes can open and close. If you're subscribed to my channel, then you probably already know that in the past I made a Spider-Man Homecoming mask with moving lenses, and since then I read all your comments, all your criticism, and yeah, it's fair to say that this mask definitely has a ton of room for improvement. So that is why in today's video, we are going to make a new and improved Miles Morales mask from Spider-Man PS5. Now, I know you want to see all the internal stuff. You want to see what's inside, right? So stick around, because in this video, I'll be sharing with you how I was able to make this mask entirely from scratch by hand using simple materials. And with a little bit of time and patience, I think almost any one of you can make this mask at home too. So if you want free templates, just check the description box below. I'll have all the show notes, links, materials, all of that will be listed down there. First things first, I found a free Spider-Man mask template online, which I'll leave a link to down below in the description. And you need to open this file with this free software called Adobe Reader so that it actually prints in the correct scale. So you want to make sure you select the poster format, set the overlap to 0, then set the tile scale to 100% or larger or smaller depending on your head size. After that, specify what type of paper you're using. In my case, it's US letter size. And voila! By the way, I'll leave a link down below to Adobe Reader, which is that software that I just used. It's free to download and very useful for printing out large multi-page templates like this one. Once the templates are printed, they are really easy to assemble. You just line up all the edges together, tape them up, and then cut it out. Now I'm going to transfer all those templates onto some thin corrugated cardboard. If you can't find any of this thin corrugated cardboard, you could also just get away with using some cereal box cardboard for this too. So just use whatever you have and it'll work just fine. Then we just fold and glue all these edges together using super glue or hot glue. Now typically you would just want to glue these two halves together like this, but I'm not going to do that just quite yet. Instead, I'm going to make some pencil marks to indicate where the face shell sits flush with my head, because even though the width of the face shell is suitable for my head, the height on the other hand, not so much. The face shell is a little too tall for my head. So I can use those markings to trim off the excess, and that will make for a much better fit and make the face shell end closer to my chin. Doing this actually made a pretty noticeable difference compared to my previous Spider-Man masks, so I recommend doing the same thing on your mask, especially if your head shape is more round like mine is. At this point, I went ahead and made the template for the lenses, and as you can see, there's a little bit of a gap right there because the holes on the face shell are quite big. But that's okay, that's a pretty easy fix. All I have to do is just trace that shape onto paper, and once I make sure it fits correctly, I can transfer the paper pattern onto cardboard, and that will get rid of the gap. Next thing I'm going to do is cover the entire face shell in resin, and here we just basically want the cardboard to soak up all that resin so that when it dries it becomes rigid and durable. So I did one layer of resin on the inside of the mask and one layer of resin on the outside as well. Also notice I put a temporary piece of cardboard on the inside of the mask there. That's just to kind of push the sides of the mask outwards. That way when it hardens it will hopefully give the face shell a little bit more of an organic looking head shape. Once the resin fully dried, I just quickly sanded it down, and you don't need to sand it like crazy or anything. This is just done to rough up the surface and prepare it for the filler that we're going to apply on it. Alright, well here is some spackling that I had left over from my Captain America shield, and I'm now going to apply this all over the mask, covering the entire thing from top to bottom. I'm being very generous with it here because I want this mask to look seamless and smooth when I put the black fabric over it. By the way, you could also use wood filler for this, or Bondo, or anything of that sort, and I think you'd pretty much get the same results. The spackling only takes a couple hours to dry, and then I can sand down the whole thing to smooth out all those lumps and get a more refined shape like this. This might have been a little overkill, but I thought it would be a good idea to give it one last layer of resin, and that will just kind of seal the spackling and prevent it from cracking. This part is completely optional, but if you want, you can spray some Plastidip over the face shell, and that might make it easier to eliminate wrinkles in the fabric because the fabric will grip onto the face shell a little bit better. I made some free templates for the lenses, and I numbered all the pieces in order. So first you want to go ahead and transfer piece number 1 onto Bristol board, and then piece number 2 and 3, you just cut those out of paper. So I'm going to glue piece number 2 and 3 behind piece number 1, and that will basically just fill in all those little slit details that you see on piece number 1. So from the front it should look a little something like this. Moving on, I'm going to take some craft foam and slice a thin strip of it. It's nice if the craft foam already has an adhesive backing on it, because we're going to run this piece of craft foam along that line that you see right at the bottom there. And the sticky back craft foam makes it really easy to do that. Next up on the template is piece number 4. So I'm going to transfer piece number 4 onto Bristol board once again and glue that onto the lens like this. And that will make for this nice beveled edge, as you can see right here. Also, it really helps to have the lens taped onto the mask temporarily while you're doing all of this, because once you're done gluing on all those individual pieces, you take off the tape and the lens will actually maintain that curved shape. So, by contrast, if you were to glue on all those pieces while the lens is sitting flat on the table, it would be a lot more difficult to get the lens to conform to the curve of the mask. So see how this lens is just naturally curved like that? That's the whole idea here. Once I was happy with that lens, I hit it with a layer of automotive primer. And there we go. What do you think? I think I really nailed the shape of these lenses. They came out really fantastic in my opinion. So before we can make the lens shutter mechanism, we just need to temporarily tape on the lenses onto the face shell so that we have a point of reference for what angle to position the shutter pieces at. So I bet a lot of you are wondering how the eyes are able to open and close. If that's you, then this is the part of the video that you're going to want to watch, because it'll answer all your questions. So watch closely here. Alright, I'm going to start by gluing in a thumbtack at the center of the mask, which will be the hinge point for the shutter pieces. Speaking of the shutter pieces, here's what they look like. I just cut them out of Bristol board, and I used some super glue to reinforce that hole right there to make sure it doesn't expand over time or anything like that. So the basic idea here is we're going to have this piece pivoting on the thumbtack, kind of like this. But before we can insert these shutter pieces into the mask, we need to paint them, of course. So first I hit them with the same automotive primer I used earlier, then a coat of Rust-Oleum Apple Red, and then to top it all off I hit it with a semi-gloss clear coat. Once the paint is completely dry, I can insert the lenses into the mask like this. And then I'm just going to put a little stopper right there just to simply keep the lenses from falling out. If there's any spots where you feel like the lenses might get jammed, like this corner right here for example, now would be a good time to fix that. Next, I'm going to take some fishing line and attach that onto the bottom shutter pieces using some super glue and duct tape, and I did this on both sides, of course. I then removed the ink cartridge out of a pen, and now we can use this tube to make ourselves a little contraption here. So as you can see, the string starts right here at the bottom, travels through these two tubes, and is glued onto the top shutter. As you can see, the shutter is pretty far away from the front of the mask right there, especially that bottom shutter, and that is a no-no. So to fix that, I used a paper clip, bent it into this shape, and then I hot glued that into the mask so that the paper clip would press up against the shutter and make it sit more flush with the front of the mask like this. Okay, so now watch this. Notice how moving the top shutter makes the bottom shutter close, but it cannot make the bottom shutter open. In other words, the top shutter can only make the bottom shutter move in one direction. However, I want to change that and make it so that the top shutter can make the bottom shutter move in both directions. So, by adding a couple more ink cartridge tubes and some fishing line here, we can do just that. And voila! See? Now we can make the whole shutter open and close just by moving the top shutter alone, which is exactly what we want here. This is really good because now all we have to do is find a way to move the top shutter, and we can basically ignore the bottom shutter because the bottom shutter will just follow whatever the top shutter does. So take a look at these. These are bike brake cables, and this right here is the secret sauce. This thing is like magic. And so watch, as you push one end of the cable, that motion gets transferred to the other side, and it's extremely smooth and responsive. So at this point, you might be able to see where this is going, right? We can basically use this bike brake to bring motion to the eyes. Now, the reason I decided to use bike brakes and the reason why they're so special is because they are almost frictionless. Basically, the inside of the housing on a bike brake has a steel wall that makes the cable glide through the housing extremely smoothly. Now, on the other hand, if you try to feed a cable or like a string through a regular vinyl tubing, there would just be way too much friction, and it would be really difficult to push and pull without there being so much resistance. So yeah, that's just kind of the thought process here behind why the bike brakes are really good for this, and why you would not be able to just feed like a string through a tube or something. So at this point, it's time now to make the whites of the eyes, and for that I'm going to use a scrap piece of clear plastic here. This is just a cake lid, but I'm pretty sure you could just use anything else, like a 2-liter bottle for example. It's best if the plastic has a little bit of a curve in it, that way it can sit a little bit more flush with the front of the mask. So as you can see, I basically just sandwiched a piece of white sports mesh in between those two pieces of plastic, and that turned out really great, I think. And now that we're pretty much done with the eyes, we can remove the lenses from the mask. Now let's go ahead and paint the lenses. Now the Plastidip kind of likes to peel up on the edges, as you can see right there, and that was kind of bothering me, so I just simply went ahead and added a layer of duct tape all the way around the edge of the face shell, and that did the trick. In order to push and pull the bike brake cable, I'm going to use syringes. So first I'm just going to get rid of this little rubber thingy here, since we don't need that, and that will get rid of the resistance and make it easier to slide the plunger in and out. Then I just drilled a small hole through the center of the tip of the syringe that is just big enough for the bike brake wire to slot through. Alright, so we can feed the wire through the syringe, then feed the wire through the plunger using that hole that we just drilled, and then from there I just went ahead and hot glued the wire to the plunger like this. And now we need to make it so that the bike brake housing is connected to the tip of the syringe. So I just hot glued on some Bristol board in between the housing and the syringe, and then wrapped that whole entire thing in duct tape to make a secure connection like this. So for the fabric mask, I used a free template from the YouTuber Brian Alzate, and I'll leave a link below to where you can download this. I printed this template the exact same way I printed the other face shell template, except this time I scaled it up to 107%, since I think this mask was designed to fit over a bare head, but since we're going to be sliding this fabric over top of a face shell, I thought it would be a good idea to scale it up slightly. After I finished putting together the pattern, I just transferred it onto some black fabric, of course. Now we need a way to transfer those webbing lines onto the fabric. So for that I used a softbox light, and I transferred the lines using a piece of chalk, which erases very easily with water. Now obviously not everyone has a softbox light, so another way you could do this is by shining a light underneath a glass table, or if you really had no other way of doing it, I would probably just tape this to a window and do it that way. For the webbing lines, I'm of course going to use puffy paint, and this is optional, but if you want you can also add about 10% liquid latex, which supposedly makes the webbing less likely to crack, but again I think that's kind of optional. Also, I'm using a pastry bag here to squeeze the paint out because it gives me a little bit more control, but that's also entirely optional, and you could just squeeze the paint straight out of the applicator bottle. Once the puffy paint completely dried, I took a wet paintbrush and used that to get rid of all the excess chalk. Now, in order to make it easier for me to sew, I just flipped over the mask and marked out all the edges of the puffy paint lines, which tells me exactly where I need to sew. You want to do your best here to match up the edge of one side with the edge of the other side, and it won't be the end of the world if you don't sew it perfectly. I know I definitely didn't line it up that well, but you want to try your best. Also, I added an invisible zipper to this mask as well. This was the first invisible zipper I ever sewed in my entire life, so I'm not even going to pretend to know what I'm doing here. Just check the description box below. I'll leave a link to a tutorial video for how to sew an invisible zipper, because I winged the whole thing, so you definitely shouldn't watch me do it. Here I just painted the edge of the eye sockets red, and that way it blends in a little bit better with the lenses, and the black part of the mask won't just stick out like a sore thumb when you look at the mask from the side. After that, I just added some sponges on the inside of the mask to make it a little bit more comfortable to wear. Also, I just slid a rubber band over the cables just to keep it all nice and tidy around the neck area so it doesn't get tangled or anything. And now we can slide the fabric over the mask. Once the mask is centered on the face shell, I can go ahead and carefully cut out the eye holes. After that, I glue on the lenses. And I used a combination of hot glue, super glue, and duct tape to attach the fabric mask to the face shell. Finally, I just touched up any areas that I missed with some more puffy paint.
Hey guys, Peter Parker here. Sorry to interrupt the video.
Hey Peter, what are you doing here?
Listen Miles, I got a question for you. So, why isn't your movie available on Netflix? You know, Miles Morales Into the Spider-Verse. I can't seem to find it anywhere on Netflix.
Dude, are you serious? Just install NordVPN.
NordVPN? What's that?
VPN, you know, virtual private network. Believe it or not, no matter what country you live in, there are thousands of movies and TV shows that are blocked in your country, like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, for example. But with NordVPN, you can access the internet from over 50 different countries. Watch this. Just open the map, click on any country, and you'll be connected in seconds. It's that easy. One click, and you'll have unrestricted access to all the content on Netflix, Disney+, and all of the above.
What? No way, that's amazing. What about you? Do you use NordVPN?
Of course I do, because it's one of the fastest VPNs out there. Plus, they also feature CyberSec, which is an anti-malware tool that acts as an ad blocker. And they double encrypt your data, which protects your sensitive information from cybercriminals when using public Wi-Fi.
Ah, can't have your web fluid formula being known by the public, am I right?
That's right. No one will be able to track you. Not even NordVPN can track you thanks to their no logs policy.
You should probably download a VPN on your phone just so that the government can't track you while we're abroad.
No wonder my spidey sense always goes off whenever I'm using public Wi-Fi. Someone must be trying to read my sensitive information. Thanks, Miles. I'll be sure to install NordVPN right away.
Actually, NordVPN allows connection for up to 6 devices at once, so feel free to log into my account if you'd like. And that goes for you guys too. Visit NordVPN using my link below or use the code Scien Crafts at checkout for a huge discount on NordVPN, plus 4 extra months for free. Try it, and if you don't like it, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video.
How's it going? Just another day in the life of Spider-Man. You wanted a Spider-Man? Well, you got one. But I'm the ultimate. I'm not like the other Spidey. These webs come with a lot of responsibility.
If you enjoyed this video, then you'll probably like my previous video as well, which was a DIY cardboard Captain America shield, so click the screen right here to check out that video. Thank you very much to my patrons for supporting me on Patreon, and thank you for watching this video.